Hi everyone, this is Cecil again, and today's Yellowstone podcast is courtesy of Nancy, who texted me from a Hawaii area cell phone number asking about information on visitor centers in Yellowstone. She wanted to get some information from rangers and from the visitor education centers inside Yellowstone, but she also didn't want to spend too much time inside. She'd rather spend her time here enjoying the great outdoors and everything that Yellowstone has to offer. So her question to me was, which are the one or two best visitor centers inside Yellowstone National Park? As is so often the case, I do suggest that you watch this on YouTube as opposed to listening to it on Spotify or wherever, as I will be using a couple of maps. You can, if you would prefer, go to the maps yourself. You can see one of them at our Yellowstone Motel site, which is ysmotel.com/map. YS, short for Yellowstone, ysmotel.com/map. And the other one will be just Google Maps, bring up Yellowstone, and you can try and follow along, although it will be easier if you use YouTube. There are no fewer than 10 visitor and information centers throughout Yellowstone. All the major ones will provide backcountry camping permits and sell you fishing permits, so I'm not going to go into that in any detail in this podcast. But what I would like to bring to your attention is that the major visitor and information centers actually have themes within them. So if, for example, you're interested in geothermal activity, or fire, or birds, or the National Park Ranger, there are specific visitor centers in Yellowstone which deal with these. The roads through Yellowstone, as I've told you before, make up a massive figure of 8, and for the most part we'll be sticking to the figure of 8, with one exception in West Yellowstone, and I'd like to start at Mammoth Hot Springs. Mammoth Hot Springs, as many of you know by now, is the park headquarters, and you access Mammoth when you come in at the north entrance from the town of Gardner. Many of you who have listened to or seen various of my other podcasts or what we call virtual Yellowstone tours will know that Mammoth is the park's headquarters, and it was where the U.S. Army was when they were sent to the park in, when was it, 1886, to try and restore order in the park. The cavalry was sent from nearby Fort Custer in Montana, but that's a different story. So at Mammoth you have the Albright Visitor Center, and the Albright Visitor Center is situated or located in a wonderful old building. It was built by the Army way back in 1909, and it was designed as a bachelor officers' quarters for the cavalry. There is so much to see and do in this area, and I do encourage you to go into the Albright Visitor Center. Their main theme is wildlife. There are also ranger talks, ranger-led programs. There are interactive displays there as well, and then at the bottom of that building, at the bottom of that visitor center, you'll find a bookstore run by Yellowstone Forever, and Yellowstone Forever is the non-governmental fundraising arm of Yellowstone National Park. They really do great work, and if you can, I do encourage you to support them. The visitor center at Mammoth is one of the major ones. The next one that I'm going to deal with is the Museum of the National Park Ranger. This building was originally one of the outlying Army posts when the Army was sent to restore order, as I mentioned before, in Yellowstone. And this is also a lovely old building. It has been rebuilt several times. It was used actually as a ranger station until it was badly damaged in the 1959 earthquake that struck just to the west of Yellowstone. We call that the Quake Lake earthquake. And what's really cool about Google Maps is just check out how, if I do this properly, we can check this out in 3D. The ranger station, the Museum of the National Park Ranger, is on the way to the Norris area campground, so you will pass it. This is probably my favorite smaller museum or smaller information center in Yellowstone. I was talking about themes earlier, and this building commemorates the history of the National Park Ranger. And not only that, it is manned by retired rangers. The next museum that we come to is just down the road, and that is the Norris Geyser Basin Museum. You probably know by now from various of my other virtual Yellowstone tours and podcasts that there are two different geyser basins in Norris. One is Back Basin and one is Porcelain Basin. And to get to Porcelain Basin, you actually walk through the Norris Geyser Basin Museum. You don't actually realize that it's a museum because you're so excited, you just want to get down to see Norris, which is the most thermally active part in all of Yellowstone. But as you come down, you'll walk through a building, and the building doesn't have walls on the right and the left side as we're looking at the map. And there is a museum there in 2 rooms. Those rooms have exhibits which explain geothermal activity and thermal area life, which is pretty appropriate in this area because Norris Geyser Basin is the most thermally active part of Yellowstone. This is staffed by rangers, and what is very interesting about the Norris Geyser Basin Museum, it's one of those that was originally built as what was known as a trailside museum. When cars replaced stagecoaches in Yellowstone, oh my goodness, all those years ago, there were no longer guides with the groups as there were when you were on a stagecoach tour. So the Park Service decided to build various trailside museums, and we will come across them as we continue our trip through Yellowstone. After the Norris Geyser Basin Museum, I want to cut across to the Canyon Visitor Education Center. The Canyon Visitor Education Center is one of the major visitor education centers inside Yellowstone. It has for its theme the Yellowstone volcano because, as you probably know by now, Yellowstone is really a massive supervolcano. So there's information on the Yellowstone volcano, on thermal features, on the geologic history of the area. There's a film on the geology of the park, which is well worth seeing. And there's also ranger-led programs there as well. It is worth a visit. We're going to continue south now, and the next visitor center that we're going to come to is the one at Fishing Bridge. Now, you know, Fishing Bridge is where you would take the road to the east entrance of Yellowstone National Park and then continue from there on the way to Cody, Wyoming. What I find really cool about the Fishing Bridge Visitor Center is that it's such a great example of what's called parkitecture. Not architecture, but parkitecture with a P for Papa in front of it. And parkitecture was developed by the National Park Service in an attempt to blend the buildings in with their surroundings. And the Fishing Bridge Visitor Center is made of stone and log, and it really does blend in well with its surroundings. Like as we'd seen before, the Fishing Bridge Visitor Center was also originally a trailside museum. You'll recall I mentioned that at one stage cars replaced stagecoaches and people were no longer accompanied by guides on their tours of Yellowstone. What is also cool about the Fishing Bridge Visitor Center is you can see through the building to Yellowstone Lake. Talking of Yellowstone Lake, the focus of the Fishing Bridge Visitor Center is on the ecology of Yellowstone Lake, specifically on birds and there are some historic bird specimens which you can see. Fishing Bridge Visitor Center also has ranger programs, and there's also a Yellowstone Forever bookstore there as well. Let's continue south now, and we pass the historic West Thumb Ranger Station initially, and we're going to take a look at the Grant Visitor Center. The Grant Visitor Center, when it was originally put in the 1970s, was really controversial. If you're looking at this on YouTube, you can see that it's right on the shores of the brilliantly blue Yellowstone Lake. And the reason that it was so controversial is that this part of Yellowstone and extending around this area is prime grizzly bear terrain because it is very close to where several cutthroat trout spawning streams are. And there was a concern that the development that was going in would affect the grizzly bear's habits and patterns of life. Notwithstanding that, the visitor center and the other buildings still went in. The focus of the Grant Visitor Center is on fire and how it has affected Yellowstone. There are also ranger-led programs from this visitor center as well. We passed West Thumb a moment ago. Now, those of you who have seen several of our virtual Yellowstone tours or listened to various of my Yellowstone podcasts will know that West Thumb Geyser Basin is my favorite geyser basin in all of Yellowstone. I am at the moment walking alongside the boardwalk next to Yellowstone Lake. That's Fishing Cone Geyser coming up, and that's got really such a wonderful history. You can see this on one of our Yellowstone tours if you'd like to take one of our Yellowstone tours at yellowstonetours.net. That is yellowstonetours.net. We operate more Yellowstone tours literally than anyone in the entire world. Having got my little sales pitch in, let's get back now to the West Thumb Information Center. This is one of my least favorite information centers in the entire park. It's a very small building manned by rangers. They do have a ranger program here as well, and there are also souvenirs available that you can buy. From a really small visitor center, we now come to the one that I regard as being the granddaddy of them all, and that is the Old Faithful Visitor and Education Center. Located in the Upper Geyser Basin, it is a really stunning new building that was put in a few years ago. The front of the building faces onto Old Faithful, and this is where you can see the Yellowstone webcams. If you have a look, if you go to our site YellowstoneNationalParkTours.com, that's YellowstoneNationalParkTours.com, we do have some of the live web streaming there, and obviously this is not Old Faithful, but the operators of the webcam when Old Faithful is not about to erupt will show you various views of the Upper Geyser Basin area. And once again, check it out at our site YellowstoneNationalParkTours.com. And if you're standing at that great new building at the Old Faithful Visitor and Education Center facing Old Faithful with your back to the building, just behind you, if you turn around now, up in the glass, you'll see where the webcam is located. This Visitor Education Center features hydrothermal exhibits, and there is just so much to offer. They've got space for classes. There's a young scientist room for kids where they have a geyser model, and there's also a lot of interaction with rangers there who also lead ranger programs. My guess is that this is the most popular visitor education center in all of Yellowstone. Let's continue now around the Grand Loop Road, and we're going to come to the Madison Information Center. And the Madison Information Center is located at Madison Junction, where you would turn west to get to the town of West Yellowstone, which is where our motel is, and you can see our motel at ysmotel.com. Y is in Yankee, S is in Sierra, ysmotel.com. We've got really affordable rates, and we have some great rooms if you're looking for somewhere to stay in the Yellowstone area. The Madison Museum was another trailside museum. You've heard me talk about them a couple of times now. It's also a great example of park architecture. You can get park information there, and there's also ranger-led programs there. The last information center I'd like to show you is actually just outside Yellowstone. It's at the town of West Yellowstone. You heard me mention a moment ago that West Yellowstone is where our motel is based. It's also where our tour company is based. You can rent bear spray from us as well. You can check that out at YellowstoneBearSprayRentals.com, YellowstoneBearSprayRentals.com. And this Chamber of Commerce, although it is staffed, this visitor center, although it's staffed by the West Yellowstone Chamber of Commerce, there's also a desk there which is staffed by National Park Service rangers, and there's a lot of interesting information. So if you're coming to West Yellowstone, check it out before you go into the park or on your way out. So to get back to Nancy's original question, which visitor centers would I recommend? Well, as you can see, if you're looking at this on YouTube, my first choice will be the Old Faithful Visitor Education Center. The area has so much to offer. It is such a wonderful visitor center as well. There's so much inside. You can stay busy there for an extended period of time. And then my second choice would be the Albright Visitor Center at Mammoth Hot Springs. It's such a wonderful old building dating back to all the old military history. It's got the Yellowstone Forever bookstore underneath down here. It's got the ranger-led programs, and there's also so much there to keep you busy. So those would be my first two. Old Faithful, followed by the one at Mammoth Hot Springs, but then the one at Canyon Village is also well worth seeing as well. Nancy from Hawaii, thank you so much for suggesting this topic. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this Yellowstone podcast on the various visitors and information centers in Yellowstone. Remember, we do have a motel in West Yellowstone. You can see it at ysmotel.com. If you're looking for a Yellowstone tour, please check out our site, yellowstonetours.net. That's yellowstonetours.net. We also offer day hikes into Yellowstone, anywhere from 2 hours to a full day. Please take a look at them at yellowstonedayhikes.com. That's yellowstonedayhikes.com. And also bear spray. If you don't want to buy it, remember you're not allowed to take it on an airplane. We've got very reasonable rates, which you can see at YellowstoneBearSprayRentals.com, YellowstoneBearSprayRentals.com. Thank you for joining me on another Yellowstone podcast. See you next time.